For a moment, picture yourself listening to my voice, watching the images on your screen. You are aware of what you are hearing, of what you are seeing, of what you are thinking right now. That awareness feels obvious, undeniable. But here's the paradox. No one on Earth truly knows what consciousness is, or how it comes into being. Science can describe neurons, chemical signals, and electrical patterns in the brain, but the raw experience of being, the inner movie of your life, the feeling of colors, sounds, and emotions, remains a complete mystery. This is called the consciousness problem, sometimes known as the hard problem. And it may be the most baffling puzzle in all of science. For centuries, philosophers debated the mind. Is it separate from the body, as Descartes once claimed? Or is it nothing more than the activity of the brain? Modern neuroscience has revealed astonishing details about brain structure. Billions of neurons, trillions of connections, all firing in complex patterns. We know how brain damage can change personality. We can trace the regions that light up when we see, hear, or imagine. And yet, none of this explains the most basic question. Why should matter, arranged in this way, produce experience at all? Why is there something it is like to be you, rather than nothing? Consider the difference between a computer and a human being. A computer can process information, recognize images, even simulate conversation. But we do not believe it feels anything. It has no inner world. You, on the other hand, live every second with a stream of experience, from joy to pain, from memory to imagination. How can this gap be bridged? Some scientists argue that if you map every neuron in the brain, you will eventually explain consciousness. Others argue this approach misses the point entirely. Consciousness may not just be complicated information processing. It may be something fundamentally different. The mystery becomes sharper when we look at simple experiences. Imagine the redness of a rose, or the taste of chocolate, or the feeling of fear. These are called qualia, the raw, subjective qualities of experience. They cannot be measured, only felt. You cannot open someone's skull and find the redness of red. You can only find neurons firing. So how do electrical signals become experience? No one knows. Philosopher David Chalmers famously divided the problem in two. The easy problems of consciousness are things like attention, memory, perception, functions that can be studied objectively. But the hard problem is explaining why there is any inner experience at all. Why isn't the brain just a dark, unconscious machine? Why is there a light on inside your head? Some have proposed radical solutions. Perhaps consciousness is not produced by the brain at all, but is a fundamental property of the universe, like space, time, or gravity. This idea is called panpsychism. It suggests that even the tiniest particle might have some faint glimmer of awareness. If true, consciousness would not be an accident of evolution, but a basic ingredient of reality itself. Others reject this, arguing that it stretches the definition of science. And yet, the mystery remains. Neuroscience experiments continue to search for what is called the neural correlate of consciousness, the exact patterns in the brain that correspond to awareness. In some studies, scientists can predict whether a subject is aware of an image by looking at brain scans. But correlation is not explanation. Knowing which circuits are active still does not tell us why those circuits produce an inner world. And so we arrive at the haunting possibility. Maybe the mind cannot fully understand itself. Maybe consciousness is forever beyond human comprehension. Yet even this conclusion leaves us unsatisfied. because the one thing we cannot deny is the experience of being. We may doubt the universe. We may doubt reality. But we cannot doubt that there is an I experiencing it all. The consciousness problem is not just a scientific puzzle. It is the most intimate mystery of existence.
Experiments in neuroscience have revealed even stranger clues about consciousness. One of the most famous involves patients who have undergone split brain surgery. In these rare cases, the connection between the left and right hemispheres of the brain is severed, usually to treat severe epilepsy. What happens is astonishing. Each half of the brain begins to act almost like its own independent mind. A patient may use the right hand to pick up an object, while the left hand tries to put it back. When asked questions, one hemisphere may answer differently from the other. It raises a chilling question. Is there more than one consciousness inside us? And if the brain can be divided, does that mean awareness itself is divisible? Another phenomenon is blindsight. Some people with damage to their visual cortex report being completely blind in part of their field of view. And yet, when asked to guess what object is placed in front of them, they can answer correctly at rates far above chance. They are not consciously aware of seeing, and yet some part of their brain is still processing visual information. This suggests that awareness and information processing are not the same. The brain can process without awareness. But then what exactly adds that magical ingredient that turns processing into experience? There are also cases of anesthesia, where a person is put into a state of unconsciousness during surgery. We know which drugs achieve this, but we do not know why shutting down certain brain networks eliminates consciousness. What is the switch that turns the light of awareness off and on? Similarly, in comas and vegetative states, patients may show brain activity but no signs of awareness. Yet in some cases, brain scans reveal responses to commands, suggesting hidden consciousness locked within. Neuroscientists search for the so-called neural correlates of consciousness, patterns of brain activity that appear whenever someone is aware. Some theories propose that consciousness arises when information is widely shared across the brain, linking perception, memory, and attention in a global workspace. Others argue that consciousness is tied to complex feedback loops, where information is constantly recycled. Still others suggest that only certain types of integrated information give rise to awareness. But all of these theories run into the same problem. They describe the structure of the brain, but not why that structure should produce subjective experience. This gap has led some thinkers to propose that consciousness might be fundamental, like mass or charge. The theory of panpsychism, once considered fringe, has gained renewed attention. It suggests that everything, down to the smallest particle, has a primitive form of awareness. A rock, a tree, even an electron might possess a faint spark of consciousness. Human experience, then, would be a rich combination of these sparks woven together. Critics dismiss this as mysticism dressed in scientific language. But defenders argue it is no more strange than assuming awareness can magically emerge from unconscious matter. Another line of thought explores whether consciousness could be a byproduct of quantum processes inside the brain. Some researchers suggest that tiny structures called microtubules within neurons may host quantum effects, allowing the brain to operate in ways that classical physics cannot explain. If true, consciousness might be entangled with the quantum world itself. Most neuroscientists remain skeptical, pointing out that the brain is too warm and noisy for fragile quantum states to survive. Yet the idea refuses to die, because it offers one possible link between the mysteries of physics and the mysteries of the mind. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence raises new questions. Machines can now recognize faces, write essays, even mimic human speech. But does this mean they are conscious? Most would say no, that they process information without awareness, like an advanced calculator. But if a machine one day acted indistinguishably from a conscious being, how could we tell the difference? Would we be forced to admit it had inner experience? Or would we still believe there is something uniquely human, beyond computation, that gives rise to the light of awareness? All of these puzzles lead back to the central enigma. We can map the mechanics of the brain in exquisite detail, but the leap from matter to mind remains unexplained. There is a gap between the third-person perspective of science and the first-person experience of being. And within that gap lies the most profound mystery of all, the mystery of consciousness itself. Consciousness is not just about awareness. It is also about choice. Every day, you feel as though you are making decisions, steering your life through countless options. But here's another riddle. Do we really have free will? Or is it an illusion created by the brain? Neuroscience experiments have thrown fuel on this debate. In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet asked subjects to press a button whenever they felt the urge. Electrodes measured their brain activity. What he found was shocking. The brain showed signs of preparing the movement almost half a second before the subject reported deciding. In other words, the decision seemed to happen in the brain before the person became aware of choosing. If this is true, then what we call free will may simply be our consciousness observing a choice already made. We feel like authors of our actions, but perhaps we are only witnesses. Yet other scientists argue that consciousness may still play a role. Even if the brain initiates actions unconsciously, awareness may provide the power to veto, to hold back, to reflect. Consciousness might not be the spark that starts every decision, but it could be the judge that shapes them. Still, the experiments leave us unsettled. If the brain acts before we are aware, what does that say about responsibility, morality, and identity itself? The mystery grows when we consider time. Consciousness is not a snapshot. It is a flowing stream. You remember the past, you anticipate the future, you live in the present moment. But physics tells us that time may not flow at all. To Einstein, past, present, and future all coexist in a four-dimensional block universe. If that is true, then consciousness is like a spotlight moving across a fixed landscape, giving the illusion of flow. But why do we experience time as a river, if it is actually a frozen map? And could consciousness itself be the thing that generates a sense of passage, weaving events into a story? Some theories go further, suggesting that consciousness is not confined to the brain at all, but is a field that permeates the universe. In this view, the brain does not create awareness. It tunes into it, like a radio receiving a signal. This resonates with ancient spiritual traditions that have long claimed mind and cosmos are inseparable. Scientists are cautious about such claims, but the idea keeps returning because the mystery of consciousness resists reduction. If awareness is fundamental, then perhaps it is woven into the very fabric of reality, alongside energy and matter. Even more radical is the idea that consciousness and the universe co-create one another. The anthropic principle points out that the universe appears strangely fine-tuned for life. If the constants of physics were even slightly different, stars, planets, and biology could not exist. Some argue that consciousness is not a late arrival in a pre-made cosmos, but an essential ingredient of it. Perhaps reality requires observers, and in some strange way, the universe gives rise to beings who then give rise to the universe itself. This loops back to the most haunting question of all. Is consciousness the product of the universe, or is the universe the product of consciousness? If the act of observation plays a role in physics, as the double-slit experiment suggested, then maybe awareness is not just an accidental spark in the brain, but a force as deep as gravity. The human mind may be a local manifestation of something much larger, a window through which the universe looks at itself. Of course, many scientists push back against these ideas. They argue that consciousness will one day be explained fully in terms of neurons, computation, and evolution. They caution against mixing philosophy with physics, but others see in consciousness the same kind of riddle that quantum mechanics revealed, a domain where our current tools may not be enough, where the rules we know cannot fully capture the truth. And so we live with the paradox. Every moment of your life, you experience consciousness directly. It is the most familiar thing in the world. And yet, it is also the most mysterious. It may hold the key to understanding not just the brain, but reality itself.
Modern science continues to search for answers, but the consciousness problem refuses to be solved. In labs across the world, neuroscientists scan brains, measure patterns, and build detailed maps of neural networks. They can predict decisions, identify emotions, and even reconstruct rough images from brain activity. Yet none of these advances bridge the gap between physical signals and inner experience. The data can tell us where, but not why. The mystery remains untouched. Some scientists pursue integrated information theory, which proposes that consciousness arises from the degree of information integration within a system. By this logic, the brain is conscious because it unifies vast streams of data into a single whole. But critics argue the theory risks labeling even simple networks as conscious, without explaining what awareness actually is. Another approach, global workspace theory, likens consciousness to a theater. Countless unconscious processes compete behind the curtain, but when information is broadcast onto the global stage, it becomes conscious. Still, the question remains, why does being on stage feel like anything at all? Artificial intelligence adds urgency to these debates. Machines now compose music, generate art, and mimic conversation convincingly. Could they ever be conscious? Or will they always remain clever imitators without inner life? If a machine claimed to feel joy or pain, how could we ever prove it wrong? The problem cuts to the heart of ethics and humanity itself. If consciousness is more than computation, then what separates us from our creations may remain forever invisible. Some thinkers suggest that consciousness is not something to be explained away, but something to be accepted as fundamental. Just as physics begins with axioms like space, time, and mass, perhaps science must accept awareness as a starting point. If so, then the study of reality cannot be complete without placing consciousness at its center. The universe would not just contain minds, it would require them. Others argue the problem may be unsolvable, not because of a lack of data, but because of the limits of perspective. Consciousness might be the one thing that cannot be fully understood from the outside. We can describe it, we can measure its shadows, but the essence of what it is like to be may always resist reduction. If this is true, the mystery of mind is not a temporary puzzle, but a permanent feature of existence. And yet, this very impossibility is what makes it so haunting. The double-slit experiment shook physics by showing that reality itself may depend on observation. The consciousness problem echoes the same theme, but from within. That awareness is not just part of the universe. It is what gives the universe meaning. Without consciousness, the cosmos would be a silent, empty machine. With it, stars become beautiful. Time becomes history, and existence becomes a story told to itself. Imagine for a moment a universe without awareness. Galaxies would spin, atoms would collide, and energy would flow, but nothing would ever be experienced. No beauty, no sorrow, no love, no wonder. Consciousness transforms cold mechanics into living reality. That transformation remains unexplained, and perhaps always will. And so we are left with the deepest unsolved riddle. How can matter wake up? How can blind particles assemble into beings that feel? You cannot doubt that you are conscious, because doubting itself requires awareness. In the end, the one thing most mysterious is also the one thing most undeniable. Perhaps someday science will uncover a new principle, a hidden layer of reality that explains awareness. Or perhaps the mystery will endure forever, an open door into the unknown. Until then, every breath, every thought, every moment is a reminder of the strangest fact in the universe, that there is something it is like to be you.